So this is Bryan Francis' forthcoming analysis called Philosophical Proofs Against Common Sense. And I do like analysis because they only accept shorter papers. Although sometimes that also means it doesn't say a whole lot. But, you know, whatever. Let's go find out. So, as always, feel free to ask questions along the way. And at the end of the paper, we get to review it. I have a review system, and that's what I'm currently working on, is getting the review site up. So that's my next thing I need to get done, is to get the review site up. I tried working on it after like months basically, and I stared there and just fucking stared at the screen for like hours.
How long is the abstract? I have a theory that the number of words in the abstract is directly proportional to the amount of pretentious wrong-headed fuckery the author is going to subject us to.
I mean, it's only this long. This is kind of short for abstracts as far as they go, but unfortunately, some journals just require longer abstracts, so it's really a function of the journal. Now, you may still be right that the journals with longer abstracts tend to have more pretentiousness in them, but you can't, it would only be within that journal, because some journals would be like, we want a 150 word abstract, some journals would be like 250 to 300 word abstract, and so it's not obvious that it, I mean, maybe the journal as a whole is more pretentious, but it's going to be within that, like, there's already, like, weird things going on. But anyway, here we go. The initial proof. Considering the following C sentences. Why do they have to do this? Why do they have to have sentences called C? Anyone with less than 1 cent is not rich. So if you're got no cents or you owe people money, you are not rich. If anyone less than 1 cent is not rich, then anyone less than 2 cents is not rich. ... If anyone less than 10 to the 14 minus 1 cent is not rich, then anyone with less than 10 to the 14 cents is not rich. It's not the case that anyone with less than 10 to the 14 cents is not rich. Alright, so this is a Sorites series. I mean, Sorites paradox, where it's like, okay, 1 grain of sand is not a heap. 2 grains of sand is not a heap. But eventually, if you pile enough grains of sand together, you get a heap of sand. So this is the same thing, but with not being rich. Okay, surely there's a way of interpreting all but the final Sorites C sentences. Yeah, see, Sorites. C sentences so that one derives from them using just modus ponens. Anyone less than 10 to the 14 cents is not rich. The final C is the negation of that very claim. To have modus ponens apply to the C's in the obvious way to make the derivation, we do 2 things. Unreal, what's up? How many philosophical papers can we get out of the brand new discovery that language is inherently vague? Yeah, to tell you the truth, Unreal, the one thing I'm still not touching with the 10-foot pole is the Sorites paradox. I still will not, I'm not going to get anywhere near this shit. Like, it just is a pain in the ass at the moment. It's going to stay a pain in the ass, and I don't see any way to, I don't see in any way I want to try to be like Sorites paradox is like right or wrong. Like, I've used it as like an example before, but like, whatever. Modus ponens is if P then Q, P therefore Q. Modus tollens is if P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. So, yeah. Hold my beer. Yeah. Well, you can feel free to Bayesian it, but like I leave that to other people. I am not fucking touching Sorites. I'm not gonna do it. Like, I will discuss it, but I'm not gonna make any attempt at like solving it. So okay. So the idea, of course, you have to, they're going to explain this, but I want to point a few things out at the moment, just because. So anyone with less than 1 cent is not rich. If anyone with less than 1 cent, then anyone with 2 cents is not rich. So you're saying, like, +1, you have to have an induction right here, where you're saying anything with just, like, every step does not change the property and anything. Modus potens, fear my logic, yes. A pain in the ass probably does not have a set value in inches. Yeah, no. Modus, okay. So we'll see, but there's some sort of like inductive step where you're saying every step has the property of not being rich, but it seems that it goes wrong at some point. All right, so let's see what the author says. Okay, says, how many separate comments does it take it for me to be getting into the Sorites paradox? I don't know. It's a good question. Many. But there's no, it's kind of vague. Very funny. Okay, first interpret the C's so that they involve the logical forms they certainly seem to involve. What the fuck does this mean? What do you mean involve the logical forms they certainly seem to involve? If we had the logical form of the modus of the Sorites problem, then like maybe we would understand it, but that is probably half the issue, is that if we just assume it one way, then we're going to basically only reveal our assumptions, not what is actually going on. You're only going to reveal like the basic way we've been thinking about this, which doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work. There are people who have accounts, but we don't have an answer that everyone agrees it with yet. So yeah. All right. For instance, all but the first and last C's are material conditionals by design. Okay, so we're just doing, basic propositional logic. So this is a universally quantified system. For all people with less than 1 cent, they're not rich. And then these are hypotheticals. So these are modus ponens. If anyone with less than 1 cent is not rich, then that's, it's a hypothetical. I mean, they're saying they're modus ponens, but they aren't actually modus ponens. Because you'd have to say someone exists with less than this amount of money. Okay. And that's not too important. All right. So second, ensure that anyone is with and is rich are univocal throughout through the C's so that modus ponens applies in the usual way. Yeah, so we're just saying there's no confusion about what it means to be rich. In order to preserve univocality, replace or analyze anyone with something like any adult person in Queens, New York in 1999 who is single with no dependents. Similarly, we can precisify is with n sense with something involving a particular measure of wealth, or we can quantify over such measures. Yeah, so take all the easy assumptions you want. True papers are the papers we learn to hate along the way. Ain't that the truth? Sorites' arguments need not turn on terms with obvious context dependency, such as is rich. They can turn on predicates such as is a pumpkin. For instance, we can do a Sorites series on there is a pumpkin by the tree by proceeding through a series of cases that diminish the pumpkin atom by atom, starting from its top. So that is it when you take atoms away from pumpkins? Or is it pumpkin-like? Or what exactly is going on? I'm not sure about that. But you do start with an object, and then you end up with no object if you take atoms, like slices off the top of whatever the thing is. So the sentence starts out true and ends up false. Or we can have the series focus on the term by. The neighboring cases in the series differ by having the pumpkin a yoctometer farther from the tree. So there's a pumpkin by the tree goes from true, the pumpkin is on the ground touching a tree, to false, the pumpkin is as far as you like. Yeah, so you just move it by like a millimeter or whatever. We can even use proper names such as Bertrand Russell. There are other standard ways of getting around context dependency. Yeah, so this is one of the issues. You're not getting away from the Sorites paradox. You're just not. The term commonsensical admits of multiple readings, one of which relativizes to the group. Something just happened. Oh, it's interesting. Thank you for gigantifying the Russell. Appreciate that, Ivan. It doesn't show up on my normal chat, but it shows up on the chat over here, so appreciate it. Yeah, so if Bertrand Russell is not smoking a pipe, is he really Bertrand Russell? All right, so here's where we're going to go. They're going to now Sorites commonsensical. The term commonsensical admits of multiple readings, one of which relativizes to group and time, so the earth is round is commonsensical for some groups and times, but not others. Let me drop music a little bit, sorry. I mean, I'm not sure of this definition of commonsensical. What if he's smoking 5 atoms of a pipe? See, this is the difficulty, Ivan. I don't know. 6 atoms, 7, I just don't know. Like I said, the Sorites is something I don't want to touch. It just scares me. Like, I don't get scared by, like, much in philosophy, but, like, this is one of these, it's just, there's too many ways you can go wrong. K-Par says, what came in my mind is emergentist theories of consciousness. It's made up of pieces, but when does it cross over into consciousness? I guess that's why Russell came up with Russellian monism, to not have to consciousness pop into existence. Yes, that is why a lot of theories that have some sort of consciousness built into it, so it doesn't just pop into existence. It's already there. I mean, that's one of the attractions of panpsychism is that you don't just like get consciousness at some point for those people who believe in like, you know, some special property of consciousness. It was already there. Yeah. You wish you asked how many nuts were in a cluster? Yeah. I mean, how many licks does it get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? Then we could reference Sorority's nuts. There we go. That's a pretty good one. You got to hold on to that one. Because that one you could probably get some like people online with Sorority's nuts. Fuck yeah. Alright, yeah. So no, that... Capers, you got a good question there. Like, you're trying to... One of the strategies in philosophy, in general, is you take the thing you don't understand and you build it into something you can handle. And then you can, like, sort of, like... So you've got, like, safety gloves when you're dealing with it. So, like, if you want, like, Russellian monism, where it's just, like, you've got, like, some sort of consciousness or, like, whatever it is, it's, like, built into the thing, you just don't know. You talk about the properties, though. But that's giving, like, basically a safety wrapper around the thing you don't understand. And that's the same thing with, like, panpsychism. And... So that's the strategy is like you turn the thing you don't want to deal with into something you can deal with. And of course, on the other side is the people who say, well, then it just doesn't exist. So yeah. So, but it's like philosophical strategy. What is your strategy for dealing with things we don't understand? And this is one of the reasons I criticize these arguments is you're explaining something that you don't understand with something you don't even understand even more. So if you want to explain like consciousness, but then you're saying, oh, we've got Russellian monism and it's like built into the nature of stuff. It's like, I don't understand that either. So it's like, whatever it is. So it's like the monism is, yeah, it gets complicated. It's just built into the nature of stuff to create consciousness. Yeah. Ow. And how do we create consciousness out of non-stuff? Or how do we create non-conscious stuff? Or how do we then, what is this experience we have? And of course, most of the people in chat I know are naturalists, and they don't give a shit about those problems. They can say, look, it's just epiphenomenal bullshit. So yeah. Hey, Cowdio, what's up? You want to play that new game, Once Human, but people saying it's spyware like Temu? Oh, I've heard of that. I don't know. But I would not install the Temu app on your phone. I installed it for a few minutes because my friend wanted to like show me something and I took it off. It's like, it's not good. It's like not good. Yeah. So, go install it on one of your friend's phones and be like, let me play. See? What you do is you get a protective wrapper, like a condom, and just do it someplace else. So that's how you do it. You just get someone else's phone and you use theirs as a guinea pig to see if it breaks their phone. You got a friend. You can do that. Okay. How you doing, Cowdio? Hope you're well. Okay, so we're talking sororities, and we're talking can you sororities yourself out of common sense? So modus ponens is truth-preserving, is commonsensical for those who know logic, but not to most other groups. Just truth-preserving. In this paper, I make no use of stronger notions such as truth-preserving in virtue of logical form. Are you doing fine? Thanks, me too. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Stipulate that P is commonsensical at a time for a certain large community, if and only if virtual everyone in the community at that time who understands P well is strongly disposed to give P a high credence. So this is just saying commonsensical is groupthink. That's what they're defining it as. In this paper, I'm concerned with common sense amongst contemporary philosophers. Some clarifications are in order. So they're calling common sense basically groupthink here. I think you missed my reply. Did you go out with your friend and those girls? Oh yeah, I did send you a reply. No, we're scheduled to go to dinner next Wednesday, but I only saw my friend very briefly today, and we didn't discuss his coworkers that he wants me to pay for. I'm sort of getting inclined like, dude, these are your coworkers. If you want like to go out with them, you're paying the extra girl. Like, I don't really care. The problem is, he don't want to pay because, you know, if he's short on cash, I understand. But he's trying to make it seem like it's my idea. It ain't my idea. This is a typical pattern for this motherfucker. Yeah, Dine and Dash. No, see, here's the problem. We bought a gift certificate a long time ago for this place. So I want to use the gift certificate. That's the whole point of going to the steak dinner, is that we bought a gift. Well, I bought the gift certificate. He said he'd throw me the money. Never got around to it, but we also never used it. So it's like, it's my gift certificate. I can use it. It's fine. But like, now he wants me to go pay extra money on top of this. He never gave me his other half of the gift certificate. So it's like, And now he wants me to pay for his coworkers. I'm like, dude, you pay for your coworkers. Just because they're female does not mean I should be paying for them. Now, if he said I'd get along with them is different. But like, he's trying to not pay, is what it's up to him. I don't really owe him any favors at this point. Yeah. It doesn't sound like a net positive anymore. It never was. It was kind of a fun situation at the time, but like it was a little bit more complicated. And you know, like I said, we didn't discuss it. He may still try to pull something. This is what he does. He likes to, you know, he creates drama. But I was saying earlier, actually, in stream, that I suspect he doesn't want to do this anymore because knowing him, he's created some drama and it would be awkward or something. I don't know. But yeah, next Wednesday. So yeah, for the people who are, yeah. So I may not be streaming next Wednesday. I may be out to dinner at a nice steak place next Wednesday for this. Agree to everything and excuse yourself and go to the bathroom and dash. Yeah. I mean, this is a work buddy. Like, I'm going to have to see him at work, like, the next few days. So it's like, it's not the case. If everyone put one cent on the table and the pile becomes rich, then we don't have to pay. Yeah. I mean, one of the things my grandma did was she was like, I'm going to give you 1 penny today, and I'm going to give you 2 pennies the next day. I'm going to give you 4 pennies the day after that. And so I was like, oh, I don't want 1 penny, 2 pennies. But she was trying to teach me about compound interest. And this was when I was a kid. And, you know, she got up to like, you know, 15, 20 bucks and then stopped. But like, it did prove the point that you add a little bit of money and then you add a little bit more on top and you keep doubling or whatever, and it does matter. What's he going to do? Stick grass in his ears? He's done plenty of weird things and stuck many things in many places. Yeah, he might. Like, how much weed did he smoke? I don't know. Like before that. So yeah. But yeah, that's it's in the works, Caudillo. I don't know. I don't have the answer. All right. Back to the paper. So yeah, we're reading about Sorites, and this person is arguing basically, for those who care. Still have people here. I don't know why people watch me sometimes, but they do. They're going to argue that common sense, like, who the fuck knows? And then they're going to be like, well, look, there is no range of common sense. Everything we say is common sense. Like, you know, there's borderline cases, and it's not very commonsensical. So, yeah, it's like sticking grass in your ears. First, the definition does not count n. There are twice as many positive integers as there are even positive integers. Yeah, so math doesn't work as commonsensical among philosophers. Although n is intuitive, if you put your mind in the right frame, it doesn't count as commonsensical for contemporary philosophers in my sense, because even though we can still feel the intuitive pull of n, the vast majority of us will reject it, since we have heard at least about elementary transfinite number theory. Yeah, so you need someone who knows elementary math, well, transfinite number theory, to know that, like, you know, even if there are more, you think there are more numbers than even numbers, it's not true, because the even numbers go on for the same amount of infinity than the counting numbers do. This is math for you. But I don't like that. Math is not very commonsensical. Caudillo, you can't cancel... Well, you can, but I can't cancel words in the paper. Yeah, you can't stand the motherfuckers, me either. Yeah, it is odd, Vipers. Slide them over and they still... Yeah, and they still map 1-to-1. Exactly. Well, that's the whole point, K-Pars. If you know math, it makes sense. But, like, if you don't know math, it doesn't really matter. I can't cancel the words in the paper because, like, then the paper won't make sense. Like, I have to be able to say the words in the paper. Sorry. I did it earlier. Thank you, Vipers. What's the point of the cancel word? It's the cancel the word when I'm talking. But not, like, I can't fuck up the paper itself. Especially when they're talking about philosophers. But yeah, okay, so that aside. Second, one doesn't have to be a successful researcher on P in order to understand something well, in the sense I'm using that phrase. For instance, I'm neither a logician nor a philosopher of logic, but I understand modus ponens is truth preserving well. I've taught logic several times. I once took a class in the philosophy of logic, and I've studied a few articles in the field. There are ways around everything, my friend. There are ways around everything. Yeah, you can do it when I babble for an hour before reading a paper. Yeah. It's like I don't turn it off, but people, like, if it was a word that wasn't in the paper, I might accept it, but it's a word in the paper, so it's just not good. So I apologize for that, though. Okay, here's the first premise of the author's proof. There exists an interpretation and group of familiar elementary inference rules of sentential logic such that 1. Each so interpreted C is commonsensical, and 2. From just so interpreted sentences, there is a derivation of a pair of contradictory claims using just those rules of inference. This is just Sorites. There's nothing... I don't see anything new here. They're just doing Sorites on logic. This has been done. I'm sure this has been done. But anyway, we'll see. Or the word common sense, but I don't find that very interesting. You can Sorites basically anything. Alright, virtually no one will deny that there is an interpretation of W of the Sorites C's, so that clause 2 holds. Yeah, see, author already agrees. You can Sorites almost anything. Any property you want, you can just make it a little bit more vague. One can derive a pair of contradictory claims from them using modus ponens. It's the interpretation that went through your mind when you first read the sentences above and immediately saw how to apply modus ponens to them in perfectly ordinary way. Yeah, but I translated correctly for you, Tindario. So I said babbles, not blabbles or brabbles. Hence, if one isn't true, then under that W interpretation, one that allows for the derivation, at least one C, the other above sentences, is not commonsensical. Yeah. So if you say you have all these commonsensical ideas, then one of them can't be commonsensical. So that would be the clause 1 failing to be satisfied. But what on earth is that specific sentence saying if it's not commonsensical? I'm not sure this is right. Keeping on the nuts theme, an excess of testicles, for example. What is this? An excess of testicles. What's the thesis again? The thesis here, Gray, is they're arguing that common sense isn't common sense, basically. So it's a philosophical proof against common sense, as you can see from the title below. Here's the paper if you want to take a look at it. But they're arguing basically Sorites. So Sorites is the heap. So it's an argument from vagueness, basically. You can't, yes, as K-Par says, you can't find the threshold for common. So there is no sense of common that's going to hold up if you say, well, look, you look at all these borderline cases and you start stepping slightly farther away from what everyone accepts. And so that's what it is. To go to the store for nicotine, vitamin N, yes, or suffer through the day tomorrow withdrawing. I'm so tired to go anywhere right now. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, my cousin spent a long time quitting cigarettes. A very long time, and eventually went cold turkey and suffered through it. But like, yeah, it's hard. I'm not sure. So here's the issue here. Like, this is actually, I think, a critical line. So they're saying something's not commonsensical. Is this actually the problem in Sorites? So like when you say like we're building a heap, one grain of sand at a time, and it starts off not a heap, and then you get to a heap, then of course any one of those steps is not a heap, but like on the whole it is. But the point is, I'm trying to make is, it's the process that in some sense may be going wrong. It's not any one of the steps. Asking if it's any one of the steps is kind of already falling into the Sorites trap. It's the sort of process of building that may be going wrong here. So this is already building in right here an issue with a certain kind of interpretation of the Sorites paradox, saying it's one of the steps that went wrong, not one of the what you're doing with the stuff. Yeah. All right. So the first and last step, so the first grain of sand or the last grain of sand are obviously commonsensical no matter how one interprets them. Thus, if one of the sentences isn't commonsensical under a W, it has to be one of the middle ones that fails to be commonsensical. Yeah, so it's somewhere along the way. But we know perfectly well that under W, each of the middle C's has the following form. If anyone with less than some amount of money or grains of sand, whatever it is, then anyone with less than n plus 1 is not rich. Yeah, so you're saying, look, if you just go one above or one below, it's all the same. Anyone competent in elementary logic can see that since each middle C is material conditional, with universal generalizations as antecedents and consequence by design. In order for it to be false, everyone with up to that amount of money has to not be rich, but someone with from that amount of money to just under that amount, so up to the limit, but then from there and up is rich. Anyone who knows about the large numbers of people in the world and their extreme spread in wealth knows that if a middle C is false, then there are two people who differ by only a few cents, and yet just one of them is rich. Or take a term such as pumpkin. If a middle C is false, then there are two pumpkin-ish things that differ in just a few atoms on their respective tops, but only one of them is a pumpkin. Yeah, so if you can think of like a pumpkin that's like been sliced up a little bit, and one of them at one very small slice is a pumpkin, and then you take one more slice, then it isn't a pumpkin. Vipers is not happy with this paper. Okay, Vipers, we should have read the one about Jews. I know. Okay. A third example. The restaurant is a short walk from here, goes from true to false in the space of a yoctometer. Yeah, so at some point, it gets a little bit, it stops being a short walk. Those are clearly against common sense for philosophers. The vast majority of us will believe their negations when asked to evaluate them. Again, according to the middle C's, it might be false, but that doesn't prevent it from being commonsensical. It's a sociological fact that the Sorites C's are commonsensical amongst philosophers who understand them well. Yeah, so it's a question of who you're asking. That's all it is. If all the Sorites C's are true under an interpretation W, and there is a derivation from them a pair of contradictory claims using modus ponens alone, but modus ponens isn't truth preserving when applied to the W interpreted C's, then modus ponens is truth preserving when applied to the W interpreted C's is both untrue and yet commonsensical. Yeah, so now you're going to say, well, the logic must be wrong that we're using. If everything else was commonsensical, then the logic must be wrong, which is often the case actually when you get into like paradoxes. You can use other logics. That's okay. The first conjunct of the consequence is a trivial logical consequence of the antecedent plus an obviously true sentence of the schema. If not P, then P isn't true. See, again, you're using a certain kind of logic where this is obvious. If you have a logic that does not have excluded middle, then this is not necessarily commonsensical. Depends on what logician you're talking to. But there are other logics out there. So if you have people like dialethists, go find yourself a grand priest, then this may not be a problem for you. Like you're saying, if not P, then P isn't true, may not be, actually, no, this is not true. I should say that this is the transparency of negation. But there are people who also disagree with that. So sorry, I misread this. I thought this was, if not P, then must be P. Like so, but whatever. This is transparency thing. The other conjunct of the consequence, if you need me to explain that, I know I went kind of fast over the transparency of negation, but you're saying not P in the logical sense here, then you're saying P isn't true. So you're translating the negation P to P isn't true in sort of the meta language. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to lose everybody if I keep going on that way. The other conjunct of the consequent is entailed by the utterly bland claim that modus ponens is truth-preserving when applied to the W-interpreted C's is commonsensical amongst philosophers. Premise 2 is a generalization of this idea. Viper says, I wish autistics didn't write papers over-explaining something obvious and go back to collecting stamps. Yeah, that too. But as, you know, our good buddy Aristotle always says, philosophers are probably among the neuro-spicy themselves, and so you get a lot of this. Yeah. It's like I am probably somewhere in the range like everyone else, but I don't know what I am. I'm not typically autistic. I never was, but like I'm somewhere just in the weirdness of the world and thought. There is no like neurotypical. It's a very strange idea that people have come up with, like, oh, there's typical ways to think about the world and then not so typical. It just doesn't really work. So, whatever. Okay, so here's where we go. We got a generalization. 2. For any interpretation, W and a group of familiar elementary inference rules are of sentential logic. If 1 and 2 from above are true of the, you know, all the sentences, but at least one of them is not truth preserved according to the interpretation, then each of them is truth preserving when applied to the W isn't true, but commonsensical. Yeah, I'm just a psychopath, nothing special. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Common psychopath. I can work with that. Yeah, so again, if you have a Sorites, then at some point something's gone wrong, but it's still common. All the steps are commonsensical. Gray says, we're supposed to take this into neglecting identity by way or knowing of common sense. Yeah, well, the idea is that at some point there's a vagueness that gets introduced where we're not so sure about the identity. And it seems to be a natural process, like a process that is common, a process that can happen at any time. At some point, you have a full head of hair, and eventually you become bald. But there's a in-between point where you kind of aren't bald yet, you kind of are bald, and it's very questionable. And so it's not we're not neglecting identity. It's a problem with. It's not neglect. It's something else. Viper says neurotypical can be quantified, but fuzzily, much like heaps of sand, a mean value within a range. Yeah. And so this is the difficulty here. If you're trying to understand it, you're going to understand some things, probabilistically, within a range, whatever it is. So. All right. So premise 3 is like 2 and being entailed by a bland thought. Negations of contradictions are commonsensical. Yeah, so not the bad things. For any interpretation W of a group of familiar elementary inferences, rules R of syntaxial logic, and 1 and 2 from above are true of the sentences we were talking about, and each step is truth-preserving when applied to the interpretation of the sentences, and all the interpretations of the sentences are true. Then, since the derivation of a pair of contradictory claims has all true premises and uses nothing but rules that are truth-preserving when applied to the W-interpreted C's, the negation of a contradiction isn't true but commonsensical. Yeah, so now you can do this with the logic. So you're saying even in interpreting things that should be true but they're not, it's still commonsensical because you can, take so many steps away from common sense using a Sorites that it's not, you're going to lose the logic, but you can still maintain the common sense. You don't fucking say. Jackasses. Okay. So, yeah, I'm losing my voice, I know. Okay, so 4 is a logical truth, but helpful to make explicit. 4. For any interpretation W of a group of familiar elementary inference rules R of syntaxial logic, if 1 and 2 from above are true, and the sentences and interpretations which entail that each interpreted sentence is commonsensical, then each rule is truth-preserving when applied to the sentences, the interpreted sentences, and at least one of the interpreted sentences isn't true, then at least one of the interpreted sentences isn't true, but commonsensical. Yeah. So again, this is simplifying. They're trying to simplify their steps from above. You're using what looks like good logic, but it's not going to hold up to be true, but it will still hold to be commonsensical. So 5 is an obvious logical consequence of 1 to 4. Just ban the terms. Well, Tindarios, that has been tried, and that's not a bad idea, but that doesn't usually work in the end. This happens a lot. So if you use, they get around that. They get around it. It's like, it's not a big deal. So you want to delete it? I can delete this. Delete. But like, yeah. But, there's no point. Like they as soon as it becomes a thing, it gets banned on Twitch generally, and then it's, yeah. Scunthorpe problem. What is this? Never heard of Scunthorpe. The Scunthorpe problem is the unintentional blocking of online content by a spam filter. Aha, yeah. So yeah, this is the issue. You can ban the term cheap viewers. Yeah. Cheap logic on fill papers, but yeah, now we're getting the Scunthorpe problem there to Darius, because everyone starts making jokes, and I don't want to have to deal with this. I actually haven't had that bad of a bot problem in a while, so I'm not that fussed about it. Twitch, I think, has been doing a slightly better job. Not great, because they came back recently, but I haven't gotten that many bots as of late. So, whatever. But I appreciate it. Okay. let's see. So now we've got some final conclusions I think the author's trying to get to. Hence, by all this crap above, there exists some interpretation and a group of familiar elementary inference rules, R of syntactical logic, such that either A, each R is truth-preserving when applied to the W interpreted C's, isn't true but commonsensical, this is from 2, or B, a negated contradiction isn't true but commonsensical, this is from 3, or C, at least one of the interpreted sentences isn't true but commonsensical, from 4. Okay, oh man, there's fun. I'm still going down to the rabbit hole of my digital life 15 years ago. Ever since I got back into that one email, I've been getting into accounts all over. Most of them were hacked at one point or another due to my bad sec practice back then. Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's like you get some weird fucking emails. I still have my AOL account. I still control my AOL account from way back when, from a long fucking time ago. But I've seen some of the shit, like, yeah, it's interesting. Ivan says, brains work in a fuzzy way. A few grains is not a heap and thousands are a heap, but there will be a point where the brain says neither but ambiguous. Yeah, this is what neural nets do. So at some point, adding one little bit to alter the probability the brain applies to each classification. They assume the classification is binary and certain. Yeah, so I completely agree with all of that. The problem is, what do we do about it? Like, are we just throwing up our hands and saying, this is the nature of the universe to be ambiguous and vague and fuzzy? And maybe that is our lot in life. But that may not necessarily be that way. Now, that we have neural nets that do the same thing that our brains do is commendable to the neural nets and commendable to the computer scientists and other people who work on these things. But are we just waving the white flag and surrendering and saying there is no more that can be done? And I don't know. So this is what philosophers are doing. They're trying to ask questions. Are there other ways of looking at this? Or are there more things we can do? Yeah. That's why you're meant to ban several words instead of just a single one. Like I said to Darius, you're not wrong. It's just it hasn't been a big enough problem. If like more and more bots start coming in, I will. Like I'll take you up on that. But at the moment, it's been not as bad. Ivan says some concepts might have formal criteria, but rich, brave, etc. are not such comments in your opinion. No, I agree with that too. You can formally define a bunch of concepts that will be perfectly analytically definable, and you won't have vagueness or ambiguity on those. But of course, there are many. Most of the rest of the world will not be those that you can perfectly define. And so, again, are we just conceding that the world is vague and there's nothing more we can do about it? Or are there other ways to think about vagueness that we should, explore? Kadeo says, you ever notice when you get a sign in from Google and is your exact fucking location? I mean, they do track Wi-Fi, so they know exactly where the fuck you are. Why are you even surprised about that? If you were on a Wi-Fi and they know the location of your Wi-Fi, then, like, say you buy internet from a provider and they know that stuff. So it's like, I'm not surprised about that at all. Like, I know they're tracking me. They try to make it less creepy sometimes, but there was a meme that went through, around like the internet recently. It says like you ask ChatGPT where your location is, and ChatGPT says, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not allowed to access that information." It says, "Okay, ChatGPT, find me a Wendy's very close to me," and it finds you a Wendy's on the corner. And it's like, oh, so it did know, it just wasn't allowed to say. It's like there's so there's a lot of stuff going on. But I mean, does Google know a lot about me? Oh, yes. Yes, Vipers, exactly. All right. Okay, so from all this argument above, there's something that isn't true but commonsensical. Now, oh, fuck, NordVPN, all right. All right, so 1 through 6 is a non-formal philosophical proof of the proposition a commonsensical claim isn't true. Now, what's interesting about this is not interesting at all. This is not an interesting statement. There's a lot of things we consider commonsensical that don't happen to be true. If I asked you that, would that be commonsensical, that there's something that we think is common sense that doesn't happen to be true? I think most people would agree with that. That not everything we consider to be commonsensical happens to be right. We get things wrong even though we think they're commonsensical. Okay. The only way for a philosopher to be aware of all this stuff and competently reject its conclusion is to reject at least one of 1 through 4. But 4 is an obvious logical truth, and 2 and 3 are obviously entailed by the obviously true claims. Negation of contradictions are commonsensical. Yeah, see, again, if you're a logician, you can get around all of this. Yeah, they already said this with the flat earth thing. Yeah. Proton VPN is nice. Good to know. I had something like Windscribe years ago because I had like a fantastic deal on it, but like it ran out after I think a few years. Like I paid like one fee and I got years of service, but that's got to be over now. I haven't used it in forever. And they were okay, I think, the Windscribe people, but that was many years ago, and I don't know if it's still the case. Okay. So negations of contradictions are commonsensical, and it's commonsensical that the derivation of familiar elementary rules of inference for the Sorites is just modus ponens are truth-preserving when applied to the W interpret C's, plus an application if not P, then P isn't true. Hence, the only competent way to reject the soundness of 1 to 6 is to reject the truth of 1, but we saw that 1 is about as certain as any philosophical claim ever gets. Again, from my weird non-classical logic side, where I don't really mind having non-standard logics, I don't find this very impressive. Now, other people who take logic to be very certain, this could have more of an effect on them. Like, say you really, really believe that classical logic is the way to go, and there are lots of people like that. You have to remember, classical logic suffers from things like paradoxes. Like, you can't have truth predicates in classical logic, or else you get the liar paradox. There's something called the Curry paradox. There are a number of paradoxes you can get very quickly in classical logic. Proton is free, and I normally just use to get around annoying website issues. Yeah. So I mean, you can always say it's the old Russell's paradox. You know, the set of things that don't include themselves, which was joked about in chat earlier. Like someone already brought that up. So yeah. What's the significance of P of 10 to the 14 being contradictory to P? It's the significance is that you've taken insignificant steps from the P of the first number to the getting to the very big number. So you're going from P of 1, a grain of sand, to P a heap of P to 10 to the 14s. Well, that would be a mountain of sand. And so that's clearly a heap. But you didn't have a heap at the beginning, and then you didn't have a heap at the beginning, and then you did have a heap at the end. And so, yeah. She fell on my oso till I fi. Well, that sounds about right. So the idea is that it should be common sense and obvious that one thing is a heap or rich or whatever, and then the other one isn't. It's just trying to make it as, like, stupidly obvious as possible. That's all that happens there. And I'm harping on it because I want you to realize something. The problem here is, like, we don't understand the problem here. It just seems like it should be the case. And if you want to just say, well, the world is vague, okay, but that also is throwing up our hands and just saying, we don't know. And welcome in, Cisco. Hence, non-formal philosophy refutes a portion of common sense for all this stuff. Yeah. Like, so what? But again, like, for someone like me who looks at weird logics, it's not common sense. You can have different logics that deal with the Sorites differently. I was talking to a guy not that long ago in New York City. He's rather famous. Well, I don't know how famous he is, but he's one of the philosophers that I can just say he's a philosopher at NYU, like a professor. He's writing a book on this. He's got a solution to this. He is also not going to be writing just like classical logic. Classical logic doesn't work for paradoxes. So he's going to modify classical logic in some way. Okay. But like, this is the only way we know how to solve this sort of paradox. The only way we know how to do it. And so everyone agrees with this. Like, anyone who's working on this problem agrees with this. Almost everyone who, everyone who works on this problem is trying to solve it. This is not a problem. That there is an issue with how we use Sorites or our words, and we have to do something about it. So, like, it's not, this paper isn't crazy. it's trying to show that like people believe the wrong thing, or the majority of people that believe the wrong thing about Sorites. But like people who care about it, we all are like, yeah, so we know it's a problem. But anyway. Alright, let's see where this goes. The revenge proof. Suppose that contrary to the argument of section 1, there is an excellent philosophical argument that 1 isn't true. Alright, so 1 is the statement from all the way up here that there is a way of making Sorites work. There exists an interpretation and group of familiar elementary inference rules of sentential logic. Yeah, so logic is okay, and so that the sentences are commonsensical, and that if you interpret them correctly, then you're do it. Thank you for the follow. So it's like that, like there is no problem with the Sorites paradox. All right. So now we're assuming that there's an argument of the form P1 to Pn, thus 1 isn't true, where the sentences P's are the premises of this amazing argument that 1 isn't true. Incredibly, the existence of this P1 to Pn, thus 1 isn't true argument will not help avoid my thesis that non-formal philosophy refutes a portion of common sense. All right, so revenge paradoxes take your solution to the other paradox and goes up a meta level and then reruns the paradoxical argument. This is a strategy within philosophical logic to show that a lot of times what appears to be a solution to a paradox actually does not work. So commonsensical truth exists without the necessity of inference rules. Yes, basically. You have to remember, our logic is not without contradiction. We have to do a lot of stuff to save ourselves from contradictions within, like, our logic. You have to restrict them tremendously. And so only people who don't realize how much work we have to put in to make our logic not fail are going to be impressed by this. Like, I've looked at this stuff. I am less impressed. I don't find anything in this argument particularly illuminating. I think it's an interesting argument. They didn't do a bad job here. But, like, for me, as someone who works on philosophical logic, yeah, logic doesn't work in certain cases. This is one of those cases. Like, yeah. Okay. So you're supposing the contrary argument, and so they're going up a level. They're saying, hey, look, there is an argument that does work. But the author says this will not help avoid the thesis that non-formal philosophy refutes a portion of common sense. Note first that virtually all philosophers who understand the Sorites paradox believe the following sociological proposition about their own community. Virtually all its members think that there's a way of understanding the sentences so that they are commonsensical and collectively inconsistent. Yeah, so that's the Sorites. Being in the community of philosophers who know the Sorites paradox well, philosophers of language, almost always means knowing a good deal about what others in the communities think about the paradox. We are social creatures after all. So philosophers familiar with the paradox overwhelmingly think that virtually everyone familiar with the paradox thinks there's an interpretation of the sentences so that they are commonsensical and jointly inconsistent. Yeah, this is what it means to know the Sorites paradox. Vipers hates this guy. Not only does he look annoying, not only does he write annoyingly, he was awarded a 50k euro grant for a project on expertise in fundamental controversy and philosophy of science. Wow, yeah. Well, there we go. I wish he looked like me, because I could use 500,000 euros. But, okay. This happens. This is a competent philosopher of language. That's who this is. Or I don't know, but like I don't want to be insulting this person. I don't really agree with their strategy here, but they sound like they're a competent philosopher of language. And so it's like this is who gets some of the funding nowadays in philosophy. Yeah. And so you may just hate like funding agencies in academic philosophy, and I'm with you on that. Okay. Do you have a picture of our friend here? Bryan Francis. Do I know Bryan Francis? No, I don't think I know this person. Bryan Francis.Weebly. Look at you, got them guns. Wisdom coach, many years experience. As a PhD student in theoretical physics, he discovered that he loved philosophy and physics, so he switched to philosophy. Yes. Okay. Well, do we have any links here? Let's see. What else we have? Credentials. Hey, Valpo. I feel like I recognize them from your grad school days. Yeah, maybe. Well, published many books. That doesn't mean anything, but these are good, these are, yeah. It looks good, though. Like, it looks good. And how you doing, Valpo? Okay, I don't know where this leaves us, but there's a scale invariant property to the way that the sand stacks, and then gravity overcomes it, makes a wider base to stack higher. Maybe it becomes a pile when it gains that property. You can always go finer. Always go finer when you're talking about grains of sand. Go to atoms. Go to vibrations. You can go down to like whatever. It's like you can always do this. If you want to talk about any one property, it's like you can always go bigger too. Like, don't talk about like, you know, whatever it is. You can go, like, you can talk distances. You can always get distances down to like the Planck length. Whatever it is, there's a way around it. Aging Bluto from Popeye, yeah. So, this person looks like, wow, they're just really, this one's a 2021 article. So, yeah, very, 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 you know, a lot of publications. Okay. Shout out Zeno. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, very good. But again, this is one of those, what are you doing with the philosophy? We don't have to love what they write, but yeah. Yeah, who knows? He does look like a jerk. I don't know. Like, you don't have to love this paper. I'm sure he looks like he's written many other things. Maybe some of the other stuff you will like better. Like, I'm saying that this article is for this area competently done, it looks like. But yeah. Yeah. And K-Pars, to get a little bit more into your, like, can't we just make everything more precise? That's part of the strategy that's getting talked about right here. You can talk about making it more precise, but then you have to talk about the measurement of like the precision. And so you go up a level and you can talk about, you know, well, how do you know that this is this thing? How do you measure that? And then you're talking about the measuring device, and then you measure the measuring device. And eventually what happens is you get back to, well, it just looks like this. And at that point, it's like, is it on or is it off? Well, how do you know? And it's like, well, you have to just do it. So there's always a way to, the Sorites is like mush. No matter where you push it, it's just still mush. There's nothing to be done. Always. You mean his profile picture on his website and Phil Papers? Okay. Yeah, I think that's what Vipers was commenting on too, but yeah. Gray says, don't worry, he wrote a book, Can We Know Everything in Debate? So he's really up to a debate with hot topics, yeah. I mean, again, if you want to sell books, you write stupid titles like that. So... okay, so let's get through this. We've got a few more pages. Where are we? All right. This shows that something is commonsensical relative to the group of people today who understand it well. No, that's just how you're defining it, man. But like, okay, we're accepting that. We're calling something commonsensical a sociological fact. Calling something sociological is fine, but that is the sociological take. There are other ways to define things. Okay, so now let's do an exercise. Let one be commonsensical. Let the hypothesized argument that 1 isn't true, the argument that P to 1 Pn, thus 1 isn't true, and modify it so all these things, so 1 isn't true and itself. So you've now added it in at the end too. So not only you're referring to your own argument within the argument, that is, add on the just defined P to its premises and make the new conclusion a conjunction of the old conclusion, 1 isn't true, and itself. Like that also 1 isn't true, the statement. Clearly, that argument is no worse than the original argument, as we are in effect just adding it to both the premises and the conclusion. Yeah. So again, they're assuming something about logic there, that's okay. That you can just add premises like that willy-nilly. Note that the new conclusion, 1 isn't true and P obviously entails by existential generation. Some claim isn't true but commonsensical. Yeah, I mean, that was what that meant. Construct the second argument from second new argument, P1 to Pn, thus some claim isn't true but commonsensical. Obviously, that argument is no worse than the one we started with, this. So, yeah. Here is the revenge proof of that non-formal philosophy refutes a portion of common sense. So now we've got another one of these huge sort of like blocks of argumentation. If 1 is true, then since 1 through 6 is clearly valid and philosophical and all other premises are clearly true, there is an excellent philosophical argument that some claim isn't true but commonsensical. If 1 isn't true, then there's an excellent philosophical argument, P1 through Pn, thus 1 isn't true. That is, if that isn't true, there's an excellent philosophical argument for that fact. The premise is not at all trivial, but it will be revealed to be dialectically apt. Okay. Well, PB1 is commonsensical. P is true, as shown by the above, reflecting on what philosophers think about each other. So again, the sociological thing that they think the Sorites is commonsensical, like that. This is what it is commonsensical to think of the Sorites as what it is. So again, now we're talking about what people think of a paradox, and then they're going to say, well, what you thought of the paradox is itself paradoxical. Boom. That's what we're doing here. Very cute. Okay, if P is true and there's an excellent philosophical argument, P1 and a Pn, thus 1 isn't true, then there's an excellent philosophical argument, P, P1 and a Pn, thus some claim isn't true but commonsensical. They showed this above, that's right. If there's an excellent philosophical argument, P, P1 and Pn, thus some claim isn't true but commonsensical, then there is an excellent philosophical argument that some claim isn't true but commonsensical. Yeah, so this is just redoing all the same shit. Hence, by 2 through 5, if 1 isn't true, then there's an excellent philosophical argument that some claim isn't true but commonsensical. 6, oh no, that was 6. So then 7, hence by 1 and 6, there is an excellent philosophical argument that some commonsensical claim isn't true. Ivan says, I don't think the Sorites works. You think the Sorites doesn't work, but can the author's argument work with different examples? No, this is a Sorites only. Why do you think Sorites don't work? Do you mean here or do you mean in general? Grace says, wasn't really an exercise, really was just more self-referential proof with other rules of logic and the premises. Yes, this is just sort of a demonstration that philosophers like to make in this area. That's what they do. They want to formalize everything to make it look like they've done something. Now, again, I can shit on this author for doing it, but this is the standard way things get done in this area. So, yeah. Well, if you can write up a paper on why Sorites doesn't work and, you can get that published in a top philosophy journal. If you, yeah, like, this guy just wrote a paper on it. This is in a top philosophy journal. If you can just write it up and make it work, you can also get published. That's easier said than done. So. I mean, to be fair, I don't think Sorites should work either. But I'm not touching it with the 10-foot pole. I've seen some of the shit that goes into these arguments. I'm not touching it. I don't know what to do. Like, I have maybe the smallest inklings of the direction I would go. And I don't want to do it. Yeah. Someone must have already made your argument. That's entirely possible. Like, go find someone who's close and see, like, okay, where you think they went right, where they think wrong. But, like, if you think it's that obvious, then maybe. Yeah. Viper says he is an agile scrum master of philosophy, over-organizing everything at the expense of anything worthwhile. Well, that's a lot of analytic philosophy. But yes, I agree. This is a argument about the Sorites, about people writing on the Sorites. That's it. Okay. So again, you can read this comment, the first sentence right here. The philosopher who thinks philosophy doesn't refute a portion of the philosophical common sense. So this is only talking about philosophers and philosophers talking about philosophy. I mean, it doesn't get any more self-referential than this. And so you have to reject the soundness of 1 to 6. Again, you can just not believe like that the logic is so commonsensical, which is the way I get out of here. Like I get out at the very beginning because I don't think the modus ponens is obviously true. What logic did you use to do modus ponens? There's more than one way to do logic at this point. So I was like, I get out at the beginning. And I suggest everyone else do the same thing. Don't assume that like the steps in the Sorites are even like perfect. They're not. Okay. And there's other ways around them. There's a lot of other ways. All right. So, yeah, so you have to reject the soundness of 1 to 6. That means claiming 1 isn't true since the rest of the argument is indisputable. Since she holds that 1 isn't true, she probably thinks there's an excellent philosophical argument against it. In fact, it's highly likely that she thinks she could tell us in detail about that excellent argument against 1. After all, 1 is highly intuitive, so if she thinks it's not true, she will very probably think she has an excellent argument against it. Hence, she will agree with premise 2. Since by hypothesis she denies 7, she has to deny 3. Since the rest of the obviously valid 1 through 7 argument is indisputable, but to deny 3 is to deny a stubborn, empirical, non-normative fact about the views of contemporary philosophers, the fact that the vast majority of philosophers familiar with the varieties think the C's can have their obvious logical characteristics and still be commonsensical. Again, this is where I get off. Obvious logical characteristics. This is exactly where I have a problem. I don't think logic is obvious. Like, I don't think it at all. And so, I'm not in this group of philosophers that the author is saying is obvious. Like, that the sociological group of people that they think this is how the world is. Okay. Philosophical significance. The proofs need not use varieties. Oh, so they're generalizing too. Many philosophical problems can be used to generate a set of sentences, a set of claims that have very similar consequences. Making lists of claims for new proofs is a matter of patience. All we need is a set of commonsensical claims that under a commonsensically available interpretation. They keep using this word. I do not know if it means what you think it means. Like, this is getting a little bit annoying to me. Because they keep saying obvious logical characteristics. Well, it ain't common to me. Now, granted, I'm a weird fucking person. Really fucking oddball. Like, I have the paperwork and the proof to show. Like, I have the receipts now to show it. But, like, this is not what it fucking... Like, the logic is not commonsensical to me. It just ain't. Alright, anyway. All we need is a set of commonsensical claims under a commonsensically available interpretation. Uses commonsensically truth-preserving inferences. Yeah, like, this is like, get the fuck off the train. Get the fuck off the train. Right there. Rules to derive the negation of a commonsensical claim. Some proofs will be significantly stronger than others, as one would expect. The liar paradox is similar to the Sorites in that it's perfectly suited to generate extremely strong proofs. In addition, one can use the problem of the many. There's at least one tree in my backyard. Every tree in my backyard is composed of chemical atoms. So for all x, if x is a tree in my backyard that's composed of chemical atoms, then there's at least one plurality of chemical atoms that composes it. Some would say, with reason, that there is exactly one such plurality. For all x and y, if x is a plurality of chemical atoms and y is a tree in my backyard and x composes y's, then there exists w and z such that w is a plurality of chemical atoms and w and x and w differ in members. Z is a tree in my backyard, and W composes Z. The two large pluralities, about 10 to the 30 chemical atoms each, are literally 99.9 repeating, overlapping, and are, to all appearances, equally good candidates for composing a tree. For all X and Y, if X and Y are pluralities of chemical atoms, and X and Y are different members, then there are trees in my backyard, T1 and T2, such that X composes Y and Y composes T2, then T1 is not T2. There is at most one tree in my backyard. Yeah, they're just, I have no idea, Vipers. I don't know. All atoms, I guess. I guess maybe they're being pedantically, scientific, because, I mean, atoms in philosophy also could be referring to ancient Greek atoms, which are not the same thing. But, like, I don't know. Gray says, okay, so I guess just by refuting any of these common sense makes you agreeing with it logically. What the fuck ever. Yeah. But, again, you're starting with a paradox. This is a Sorites paradox. You're starting with something that can derive anything. That's what happens in a paradox. You get contradictions and it explodes on your ass. That's why we don't like contradictions, and you have to do something about them, because when you get contradictions, anything follows from contradictions using classical logic. They're using classical modus ponens here, and we're getting contradictions and anything follows from it. This is not a surprising result. Especially if you start with paradox. You're starting with contradictions. Okay, so... yeah, there's at most one tree in your backyard because, all right, you know, like what the fuck ever. Okay, so although these claims are commonsensical, some of them are not as commonsensical as those for the Sorites or liar. Is it any better with modal logics? No, K-Pars, it is not any better with modal logics, but it's not the worst paper. No, this is a competently done paper in this area. We can hate it for its content, but not for the skill in writing it. And this is one of the reasons I don't deal with this sort of stuff, because this drives me crazy. Like, I don't like it. I don't think anything is being said here. It's just sort of, circle jerking the Sorites, which I don't think it needs to be done, but it's very well, like, it's a really good circle jerk of the Sorites. I'll give it that, because they're making all these little analytic arguments and shows you can't get out of it. I didn't think you could get out of the Sorites anyway. Like, I started off talking about this, saying this isn't something I don't touch with the 10-foot pole. K-Pars, you cannot solve your problems with modal logic. Adding more logic for something that you can do without modal logic, you're just adding machinery. Now, the question is, could you define more machinery that will work for this? The answer will vary depending on who you ask. Like I said, there's a philosopher at NYU writing a book on this right now. I know because I talked to him about it not too long ago. And, I mean, I didn't talk to him about it. He just mentioned that he was doing it. And so he's going to be doing some fancy shit to solve this. Now, will that be modal? Maybe. Maybe there's a way to make the modal logic work to solve this sort of thing. But no one has an agreed upon solution to the Sorites or even the Liar or the Curry or any of these logical paradoxes. I mean, it's Russell's paradox again, too. Like, something that is a set that's defined by not being a member of the set, then is the set a member of itself? Well, if it is, then it isn't, and then you get yourself a contradiction. And it's the same thing. That's what they're doing here. If you're saying that it's commonsensical and logical, then it turns into being not logical and commonsensical, or vice versa, one or the other. But adding more logical machinery does not solve your problem just on its own. You have to find a way to solve the actual problem here, not just giving yourself more logic. All right. Hi, Roni. What's up? What do you think of the priest take on the liar paradox? My bad if it's off topic. Fuck it. There isn't a tree in your backyard. Well, there you go. Priest is a dialetist. He uses so he thinks certain things are both true and false. So, like, the liar paradox is a true and false sentence. You can have things that are both true and false in the world. And he just says, grow up, people, give up. Like, not give up, grow up. We've had this for a long time, and it's about time people stop trying to force things from being both true or false and not both. Like, he's just like, give up on it. It's not a give up, but like, grow up in some sense is his position. That's a really old take, like the classical take. I personally think that it's like, I don't go that way myself. I do other things, but the issue is that I'm not that far off in, like, it's like philosophically I'm slightly different. In practice, you're gonna have to use a more sophisticated logic than the classical logic where you get the liar paradox, and I'm very much in agreement. Like, it's in the sort of like how you sort of interpret the logics, but it's gonna have to be a non-classical logic. Personally, I'm more power complete than power consistent. I say, instead of him saying there's both true and false things that overlap, I say the world's kind of gappy. There's like holes in our like reality. And so I'm more, it's called power complete, not power consistent. So he has power consistency, I'm more power complete. But when like coming down to it, the logics are like almost interchangeable. So like his non-classical logics I'm very close to in how I sort of interpret things logically. Philosophically, I have some problems with, I don't think he's got the right philosophy of it, but it's not like we're closer in reality than just like like the fact that I can talk to like we can have a discussion on our differences in interpretation means that like we're actually kind of close. We're just discussing like the details here. And full disclosure, I know Grand Priest. So like I count him as a friend. So it's like, if I'm overly nice about Grand Priest, call me out. Ray says he's implying that there needs to be steps taken to not fall into the paradox when doing philosophy. Why? What steps? Wait, who? Me, Graham, Hironi, whatever. Non-classical power complete logic. That, thank you, I'll check out. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not a normal person. Like, I do not do normal shit. The author, okay. Needs to be steps to not fall into the paradox when doing philosophy. Why? What steps? Yeah, people are afraid of paradoxes because they think, you know, if logic collapses, that's bad. So you don't want to do that. Yeah. And high and by Hironi, I guess then. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything more to say about that, but yeah. And I'm not even power complete. I'm something even stranger than that. Hartree Field is sort of a power complete person. I don't agree with Hartree either. I'm just closer to Hartree in interpretation, but I still think that's not the actual solution. I have a paper under review. But yeah. So, Gray, the general problems is that we're trying to eliminate issues within our logic and mathematics. And when we can solve edge cases like this, it generally leads to progress overall. Don't cross the streams, yeah. So when we can start to figure out what the mistakes are, like, you know, we think we have solutions to like Zeno's paradoxes. We understand the world better. We're not concerned about Zeno's paradoxes anymore. But that took a lot of work. Like, Zeno's paradoxes make sense if you're looking at the world from the way they did 2,000 years ago. But nowadays we can solve this sort of stuff, but it takes a lot of work. And so we're trying to solve these problems to like understand more. And like once we do that, then we can, you know, it means we've moved on. Either solve it or prove it impossible. Yeah, and if you can prove it impossible, mean it is something we will never know, then we can know to avoid that and we won't waste our time anymore. And so it's like, it's not a bad thing to do. Yeah. Gray says, so we can just go out of our way to imply and define absolute logical definitions of these things. A heap is 10,000 grains. Yeah, definitions won't save us. That won't work, actually. That's kind of what's happening in this area, is that if you try to get out of it in some easy way, there's ways to fuck with that too. No matter what easy way it is, these things come back to bite you. That's actually why this section's called Revenge. Like, I don't know if you remember, but okay, not this. The previous section, this is called the Revenge Proof. That's why they're called Revenge Paradoxes. Because you think you're going to get out of them by one of these definitions or easy ways out, and it doesn't work. These things are logical paradoxes because they go all the way to the heart of the logic. You can't get out of them by some simple definition or easy way out. It doesn't ever work. And these are called revenge proofs because of that. The way you think you got out of it won't actually get you out of it. Yeah, and that's where the name comes from. Revenge of what your solution comes back to bite you. All right. Okay, so now we're back to talking about what you think is commonsensical, but if you screw with the logic, you can get yourself a paradox, and then what you thought was commonsensical is not true anymore. So, everyday life claims. Some people are rich. There are trees in North America. Elementary logic claims. Modus ponens is truth-preserving. Contradictions aren't true. See, again, like I said, if you're going to deal with Grand Priest, contradictions can be true sometimes. There you go. You have a counterexample to that. Or modus ponens is truth-preserving. There's something called substructural logics. Guess what doesn't have to hold in substructural logics? Modus ponens doesn't have to be truth-preserving in substructural logics. People do this shit. It's maybe not the way to go. I don't do that stuff, but like, again, there are people that disagree with this, and so depends who you're dealing with. Philosophical claims. If a tree is composed of atoms, then there is a group of atoms that composes it. It's not the case that anyone with less than 65,000 euros is not rich, but someone with less than 65,001 is rich, or some other amount of money. If A isn't true, is true, and then A isn't true from the liar. Okay, yeah, so just philosophical nonsense you think is okay. Interpretation claims. Some interpretation of the Sorites claims has them commonsensical and functioning as the only premises of a derivation of a contradiction using just familiar elementary inference rules. Yeah, that's a definition. If there's a proof P that there exists false claim K, that the vast majority of people today who understand K understand K well, are strongly disposed to assign a high credence to, then P is philosophically significant for those people. Yeah, so all of a sudden, if you be like, oh, that thing you thought was true is not true, well, that's significant then. But again, if you're just Sorites it, is that actually significant? I don't think so. All right, hence we have shown that there are philosophically significant informal philosophical proofs. To that extent, philosophy achieves real results. To whom? To whom did it achieve real results? This only applied to the philosophers. So philosophy is important to the philosophers. Good job, author. Okay. Yeah, see, some philosophers. That's all this refers to, though, there. Some philosophers will think that the everyday life category is the most significant one. Perhaps that is the best way to interpret the defensive common sense of all the people who defend it. However, whether it's significant that a commonsensical claim K isn't true might depend on whether K is paired with a closely connected truth that does the work that K was supposed to do. Okay, so now we're shifting the discussion slightly. It's not that K was true, but there's something nearby it. For instance, students in metaphysics classes often insist that compositional nihilism, the view that there are no proper parts, is merely superficially counterintuitive. After all, according to the simple version of nihilism, although there are no trees in North America, since if they existed they would have proper parts, there are a great many tightly knit groups of simples arranged tree-wise, and those individual groups are located precisely and only where common sense says the individual trees are located. Yeah, so there are no trees, there are just atoms arranged tree-wise. Refuting there are trees in North America might not be as significant as commonly thought, despite the fact that it falls into the everyday life category. It depends on 1, whether there are truths paired with falsehoods, and 2, whether the fact of such pairings diminishes the significance of the refutation. Yeah, there are philosophical ways around everything. That shouldn't be clever. That is not clever. Okay. Since there are many philosophical problems that can generate excellent arguments of the form all of this stuff, there are many false commonsensical claims. Suppose almost all of them are in the latter 3 categories, and perhaps there's virtually nothing in the first category. So all your everyday stuff is fine. The philosophers who think philosophy doesn't refute common sense can be charitably interpreted as claiming that philosophy doesn't refute the claims in everyday life. On the other hand, if they are right, then claims from everyday life have been spared. But that means we have missed 1, the lack of soundness of the simplest elementary inference rules. Yeah, that's possible. 2, the falsehood of many standard philosophical claims, such as if a tree is composed of atoms, then there's a group of atoms that composes it. Or 3, the falsehood of the empirical platitudes, such as, quote, some interpretations of the Socrates claims has them commonsensical and functioning as the sole premise of a derivation of a contradiction using just familiar elementary inferences rules, end quote. Hence, that means most of us are bad at philosophy. Well, I agree with that, since a great many of us endorse those false claims in our work. Flatter yourself as one of the exceptions, then focus on the unwashed masses for the purposes of this paper. In another paper, I examine the epistemic consequences. On the other hand, if many of the false claims are in the first category, then 2 interesting results follow. First, everyday common sense contains many remarkable falsehoods refuted by philosophy. Second, the Morean move made so often in philosophy, when you encounter what you realize to be a philosophical argument that goes radically against everyday common sense, retain your commonsensical belief, and conclude that the philosophical argument is unsound, is unreliable. In fact, it's unreliable even if the false claims are in the other categories, since the move is made in philosophical discourse constantly. Okay. Well, I actually didn't hate this conclusion. Like, this one here is finally not terrible, actually. What they said down here. I don't like the rest of the paper.
Thank God that's over.
But yeah, now what we do, I'll tell you why I think this last comment is not bad. But like, this is, I think, the only redeeming thing in the paper. But like, here we go. Here's what we do. If you're still awake, please review the paper. We've got our emotes here. If you thought it was fun, gave you fun ideas, give it a brain dance. If you made big claims that shriveled up, nog grapes. Nog navel for navel gazing, only for academics. Or for deeper ancient ideas. Scream for existential artistic drama. Nog turd for all style, no substance. Nog knife, slicing and dicing arguments. This is gonna get a nog knife. Bro, that Sargon Lamau? What's Sargon? Okay. Oh, thank God. Which God? Ana de Armas. Okay, good to know. Yeah. Yes. And there's also the global yay, nay, and vote meh. And I apologize, you need to have proper spelling and capitalization for this. The TTS voice. That Sargon? No, this is Popey. Alan Pope is the voice. I have others, but I don't really screw with them. Sargon of Akkad. His voice is open source. That's why it actually can be used other places. Tender, juicy nuggets. So yeah. Okay, let me just explain why I said that last little bit was good. They used the Sorites to argue against Moore. And they say, look, you can do a Sorites argument against Moorian everyday stuff. But of course, Moore would be like, fuck you, I'm sticking with my everyday, not the Sorites. You have to believe the Sorites more than you believe your everyday life. And that's the problem. No one would do that. That would be a silly thing to do, because if you believe everyday like things like this is a hand, well, of course you can Sorites. Oh, look, I got like ink all over my hand today. I got some purple ink for one of my pens, and I spilled it all over my hand. Good job, me. But of course, am I going to say this is a hand and then like Sorites away? Well, if I take one atom away, it's not a hand. Well, if I take two atoms away, is it still a hand? Well, that's fucking stupid in my book. Of course you can Sorites this, but you wouldn't. You start from the premise this is a hand. Yeah. The end was just as bad as the rest because it was just a wordy way of saying the fucking obvious. You know, that's fair. Like, they could have said that, like, this is just the beginning, too. They're saying that we're going to take away the, like, this actual, I'll say one thing. Saying the Moorian move is not the same thing as saying commonsensical facts. The Moorian move has more, like, philosophy behind it. It says, as they also said, that you take the common sense over the complicated philosophy. And they're saying, well, no, we undermine that. I think that's a wrong thing, but that is at least a stronger claim than they were making against common sense in general for any sort of like commonsensical stuff. Kind of sounds like I rejected his thesis. Yes, that's exactly what happens. Why would I take the Sorites paradox as something more fundamental than everyday life? Question. Like, really, why would I? Why would I take something that has caused us problems as more fundamental than everyday life? Which, you know, works to whatever extent it works. And so, you know, the problem with this is if you are in this area, this was like a somewhat competently done paper. I don't agree with it. I think it ignores, it takes very sort of pedestrian views about logic, which is okay, but like it's not good. No one in the paradox literature thinks you're going to get away with just classical logic on its own. No one thinks that. And so the idea that you're just going to hold modus ponens as the fundamental inference rule, that's kind of suspect right from the get-go. And it's setting themselves up to have their conclusion without taking some of the sort of like what we think about it seriously. Yes, exactly, Gray. I'm not streaming right now. So what am I going to give this? This is a vote meh from me because, like I said, it was competently done. I don't agree with it, and I think it's got problems, but like this is not like a bad paper in this area. It's just I'm not very happy with it, and I think I've explained why. It's gonna get some nog knives. Like, this is just analytic philosophy at its maybe best and worst. It's gonna get a nog navel. Because it's really only for philosophers. No one else is gonna give a shit about this. It's getting 2 of those. So it's 2 analytics, 2 nog navels. This is just high analytic philosophy is what it is. So, paper is sussy. Yeah, a bit. But like, and the only thing that I care about is in this last sentence, well, last paragraph, and it's like, well, they don't even talk about that. The epistemic consequences later, but I already reject their premises. And so I don't like anything that they did. Yeah. Yeah, it's like they're trying to apply this common sense philosophy of language, and then they're not really taking the logic seriously. And it's like, well, that's too bad. I'm like looking at the references here. There's nothing in logic here. I mean, Lewis counterfactuals. No, that's not logic. It's from 1973. This is something else. Common sense is evidence against river. Yeah, see, there's nothing in logic here. There's nothing in logic. It's all metaphysics and philosophy of language and like old mind and stuff like that. So. Alright, if anyone else wants to get reviewing, you got 60 seconds. Get your answer in. Get your reviewing. Appreciate everyone who reviewed. Thank you, Ivan, for hanging out. Thanks for the raid again. Tender Juicy Nuggets, you thought it was fun. Tindarios, Vipers, for getting your reviews in. Appreciate it. Yeah. You love some good philosophy mind? Well, I appreciate you sticking around and commenting. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to go. That's the best thing I can say about this, is like, we're using a paradox to try to get a result in another area. K-Par says, met in a naval, learn things, but using it more like a foil. Yeah. Unfortunately, you have to write the whole Nog naval out. If you've got the extension installed, you can like tab through, but I'll fix it later if you don't. But if you want to do a naval, you have to do the whole thing. Yeah, if you like it for, you know, the analytic sort of like flavor of it, that's fair. I mean, I'm giving it the knife. Yeah. No, it's not a sub emote. It's a these are all better TTV emotes because I don't want you have to sub to get it. And the vote met is actually that's also a better TTV emote too. But I just did it in the style of the global vote yay and vote nay. So yeah. I don't want to force people to have to sub to vote for papers. That's not how we do things here.